known for the friendly atmosphere we have here, so that's lovely to see that in play already. So for those of you on YouTube who are joining us, very welcome, and we will later on when there's questions, we'll look at YouTube as well to see if anybody has got a question here. But for the benefit of everybody on YouTube as well as here, so we're in the middle of Julia Perry in Focus Week, which is an attempt, or rather the culmination of Michael Harper's AHRC grant in collaboration with the BBC, who he's held in previous years, and which comes to full flowering really in this week, where we're doing performances, masterclasses, research and discussion about Julia Perry, and about African American art song and African-diasporic art song as well. So, and that of course feeds into our research forum today as well. The topic of which is a consideration for our understanding of this art song. So I'd like to ask Michael to come on stage, because Michael will introduce our speaker, Louise Toppin, in a minute. Michael is our principal, is a principal study vocal tutor at the RNCM here, but you're also a vocal repertoire teacher at the Guildhall and at the London Opera Studio. So, and Michael has held this research grant from the AHRC, these prestigious grants that go about, and this is the, like I said, this is the culmination of it. So please give a warm welcome to Michael and to Louise.
Thank you. So I'm really excited about this week because it's taken a lot of effort and a lot of planning from the research department, from everybody in this institution has been involved, and it's so exciting for it to be happening. To bring this woman, we don't have a picture of her, but it's coming. To bring this woman back to life, this woman who is such an amazing composer, such an amazing thinker, who just fell into obscurity for so many reasons that I'm sure Dr. Toppin will explain to you. But what we know is that if composers have champions, then they live again. Think of Bach before, was it Mendelssohn? Bach before Mendelssohn, and many composers who didn't have champions, and all of a sudden, Mozart was all over the place, and someone decided to put to catalog him. Handel had a revolution. Years ago, I went to this conference called the African-American Art Song Alliance. All the way in California, I was spending my money. I thought, why am I doing this? Why am I doing? And then I got there, and I met all of these amazing people who were doing the things that I was doing. And there was no competition, it was all just collaboration. What are you doing? What are you doing? Can I help you with that? Can I help you with that? And I met Dr. Louise Toppin. And I said, Toppin, that sounds a very familiar name. Because she grew up in the town right next to mine, in the university that was up on the hill, she likes to remind me, and I was down in the valley. Her father's name was well known in my town as a professor at this university. And so I introduced myself to her, and then we sort of kept in contact. So when I was doing, I started to think about doing an anthology of art songs by African heritage composers. And my friend, Dr. Lisa Edwards-Burrs, said, oh, you should talk with Louise. So I called her up, and she was so lovely and so generous with her time. And we didn't know each other, we knew of each other, but we didn't know each other. And she was so generous with her time and her spirit. And then when Julia Perry came up, when you're researching composers who are long gone and their families maybe aren't that interested in or just don't know what to do with their papers, you run into blocks. And so I was running into blocks, going a little bit this way and then running into a block, and then thinking I could go down a different path and running into a block. So I called Louise, and she said, oh, well, I know some people in this place, and this place, and this place who are talking about Julia Perry as well. Shall we form a working group? So we formed a working group, and I got to know Louise better. And she represents everything that's wonderful about where we come from. There's a generosity of spirit, there's an intellectual acuteness. Because those are the people that we come from at that university. There's just a great intelligence. And the best part is her generosity of spirit, and you'll hear more about that when she talks. So I would like all of you to give a warm welcome to Professor Dr. Louise Toppin.
been such a pleasure being here. And before I start, I do have to explain that comment about being on the hill, because now we've said it a couple of times. So the village that I'm from is called Ettrick, and the city he's from is called Petersburg. And Ettrick did sit on a hill, but the reason was, if you know the story of Powhatan and his daughter Pocahontas. And Pocahontas is a well-known name, but sometimes people don't know. Her father was the Indian chief Powhatan. He gave Pocahontas Ettrick as a stronghold because it sat on a hill and there was a large river before you got to the next body of land, which was Petersburg. So we were surrounded by being up on a hill, but it was really a stronghold. It was a strategic stronghold, and all the area around us had Native American names. Matoaka, which is the high school I went to, was the other name for Pocahontas, and so there's that whole area had that. So it wasn't that we were uppity on the hill. It is that we were on the stronghold. Thank you very much. If anyone tried to attack us in the 20th century. All right, I'd like to start by letting you hear a piece Nadine sang so beautifully on Monday. We started with this piece, Free at Last, but I'm going to let you hear it sung by a man. It was recorded on a label that I own called Vidamus, and the singer is Robert Honeysucker. So just listen to Julia Perry, a piece of Julia Perry's, and then we'll talk about her. So now you thoroughly have in your ear the sound of Julia Perry and her spiritual arrangements, but as I said, we had such a beautiful performance on Monday, and you've got a second interpretation to hear of the same piece. I did forget to start by thanking Michael Harper for this wonderful invitation to be here with you all this week, and for all the administrators who were so kind and have worked so hard to bring me here, and the generosity of the students that I've enjoyed spending time with from Monday to today. I've spent a lot of time with some students. Okay, I would like to begin this talk by looking at a study about orchestral diversity in the United States. Sorry, that's what happens with things. So the League of American Orchestras is the country's largest organization that includes all orchestras from community orchestras through orchestras like the New York Philharmonic and Chicago Symphony. So all of them are members of this orchestra. And for the last couple of years, they've been looking at what diversity they have in how seasons are changing and people are incorporating diverse perspectives in their repertoire. A second group is working on diversifying the players in the orchestra because those have been considerations, and that's been going on a while. So last year's setting, the 2023 report that was put out by this group for the League of Orchestras, Dr. Rob Diener and Corey Meals, wanted to see, they broke it down further. They looked at women of color and men of color, then they broke it down further to African-American men and women. And I want you to see the results because to me they were surprising. The first and most person that you would expect, so they looked at how many pieces were performed, and this is all orchestras in the country that reported in, and what were the unique titles, meaning how many different titles were actually performed. So the number one, this was not a surprise to me. Florence Price is the first internationally recognized African-American woman composer. So I expected her to be at the very top with 63 performances and 24 unique titles. I will say I'm disappointed in the sense that I just said this is every orchestra from community to the large ones. I don't know who reported in, so we don't have that data, but 63 is actually low to me in thinking of it. But it's the top of the pyramid right now, and we're going to continue to see hopefully the number go up.
In 1 year?
This is in 1 year, 63 in 1 year. So thank you for that clarification. The 22 study, which I also looked at, actually was about half of that. So they made there's been significant movement. Jessie Montgomery, how many have heard that name? Okay, a couple. Jessie Montgomery is a young African-American composer. So it's kind of interesting that the first international to someone who is living and young today, I would guess she's probably in her 30s, maybe early 40s, so she's really young as a composer, is a close second to Florence Price with 52 and 14 unique titles. Number 3 is Valerie Coleman. Valerie Coleman is a part of a group called Imani Win. So she's a professional player, she's a flautist, but she also had 19 performances. She doesn't have, I put one with a question mark because they actually didn't say how many unique titles, and I could only think of one. And so it might be 19 performances of the same piece. And then number 4 at the list was Julia Perry. The person people don't know had 13 performances, but look at how many unique titles. 9 titles were found to perform for Julia Perry. Whose name is missing that you would expect? Margaret Bonds came in after Julia Perry. And Margaret Bonds, and so what is her appeal? And that's what we're going to talk about and look at. So if she's number 4 on the list, why is she forgotten? Or so few people know who she is today. So Julia Perry's background, just a little bit about this quickly. She was born in Lexington, Kentucky, March 25th, 1924, and then she moved to Akron, Ohio, where she died April 24th of 1979. If you do the math, that's 55 years. So she had a very short life, but accomplished much in that life. And we're just going to talk about a few quick things. She's the 4th of 5 girls born to a school teacher mother and a physician father who was also a pianist. The family is very close-knit. They worked together when she had challenges. They were working with her almost to the point of smothering a little bit. Sometimes you see those comments made about her. She was 16 when her eldest sister, a talented cellist and pianist, all the girls were musicians as well, but her sister was killed by in a train accident. And for her, music became her solace from this tragedy, as she and this sister were particularly close. And I'll talk about that in A Poor Little Orphan. I think that's tied into that. She was educated at Westminster Choir College in voice, piano, violin, conducting, and composition. Did you hear that list? Most people are not, and she was actually proficient, not just trained, because I was trained in flute, violin, clarinet, piano, and voice. But you don't want to hear me play flute, violin, or clarinet anymore. So there's a difference in proficiency level. I can still play the piano quite well, thank you very much. But that's it, piano and voice. She studied from 1943 to 1948, and in the 1950s, she further studied at Juilliard in operatic conducting. So she not only did orchestral conducting, she went back and does operatic conducting. She studied with Nadia Boulanger and Luigi Dalla Piccolo for composition. So that should already start to give you a sense of her soundscape and what kind of composer she'd be. She lived and worked in Europe, particularly Florence and Siena, for many years in the 1950s and became fluent in Italian. Is her brilliance starting to shine a little bit? She taught composition, orchestra, and voice briefly. Who teaches voice, orchestra, and composition at the same time? Briefly at several universities, she did this nonetheless, in the 1940s and 1950s in the United States, at Akron Conservatory, Florida A&M, Atlanta College, and Hampton Institute. She was the winner of the Boulanger Grand Prix in 1952. That's a big deal. She won, I think it's 3 Guggenheim Fellowships, 2 Guggenheim, thank you for correcting, 2 Guggenheim Fellowships. To even win one is a big deal, by the way. She was at the MacDowell Colony as a resident for many years, and she won many more awards. It's too numerous to count. I don't want to go into that. According to Maria Popov, in her article on Perry in 1965, her short piece for orchestra became the first composition by a woman of color to be performed by the New York Philharmonic, and only the 3rd piece ever played by any woman with that orchestra. She was celebrated and nationally recognized for her work and was considered on par with her colleagues Hale Smith and T.J. Anderson's, whose names are certainly more recognizable in the United States today. Are those 2 names you know, T.J. Anderson and Hale Smith? If you've heard these names, can you raise your hand? Ooh, we don't know those either. I'll have to come back for that. But they are known, in addition, so they were leaders and profound writers during the Black Arts movement of the 1960s in the United States. But Anderson is also remembered for his operas and orchestrating the first performance of Scott Joplin's opera Treemonisha. So he is the person who did the first orchestration. They had a second orchestra, and that was done in Atlanta in 1978. They did a second orchestration also in 1978 with Gunther Schuller, and that's the one that goes in the record books. That was the stage production. And so they actually did a 50-year retrospective to show that T.J. Anderson had actually done the first orchestration and performance. Hale Smith is remembered for his symphonic works such as Contrasts, his orchestrated spirituals, and his compositions for jazz artists such as Ahmad Jamal. So I hope you can see from the portrait of those 2, they not only worked in the classical space, but in the case of Hale Smith, he's writing jazz tunes that are winning Grammys with Ahmad Jamal while he's working with 3 third-stream jazz composers and classical composers. So at this point, these composers are quite eclectic and not afraid to work in several spaces as they are celebrating who they are as composers and as African Americans in the country. All 3 of these composers were brilliant thinkers and writers who forayed successfully into the world of symphonic composition, which had been closed to African Americans for quite a long time, while never losing their grounding as African Americans. Hale Smith was quoted in Bill Banfield's book, Landscapes in Color, as saying that he had a universal message in his work and wanted his music to be judged on its merit, and he only wanted to be acknowledged as an African American when he stood up for his bow as the composer. Perry shared a similar view of universality and is quoted in 1949 as saying the following in Popoff's article: "Music is an all-embracing universal language. Music has a unifying effect on the peoples of the world because they all understand and love it. In music, they find common meeting ground, and when they find themselves enjoying and loving the same music, they find themselves loving one another. Music has a great role to play in establishing the brotherhood of man." I'd like to let you listen to one of her orchestral pieces that it's been arranged for orchestra. This piece was originally written for piano. It was called a Prelude for Piano, and it has been orchestrated now as Prelude for Strings and recorded by Experiential Orchestra. It is coming out on their CD, American Counterparts, due for release March 1st of 2024. So you are hearing a pre-release with their permission. So I'd like to let you hear this short piece to get a different taste of what Julia Perry's music sounds like outside of the spirituals. What did you think? Isn't that appealing? A beautiful, beautiful piece. According to J. Michelle Edwards on her article about Julia Perry, and by the way, the music that you're going to hear today, some of it has not been heard for a while or at all, so I'm happy to share some things that maybe you haven't had a chance to hear. In the 1960s, Perry's large-scale works were published and distributed by some of the largest publishing houses in the United States, and some of her works even received commercial recordings. However, the 1960s saw the beginning of some serious health challenges. She developed acromegaly, sorry, I had to look at the word again, which is a rare condition resulting from excessive production of growth hormone by the pituitary gland. And you can see it a little bit in her face now. It's demarked by a forehead that's protruding, long elongated fingers and ears. So those are some of the attributes. This causes enlarged bones in the face, feet, and hands. In about 1971, she had a stroke, which paralyzed her on the right side. As she was right-handed, this meant relearning how to write and compose with her left hand. Although this was difficult, she continued to create compelling works until her death. And I wish we had put the slide we have of Quinary Quixotic songs that he has typeset, because you can see the difference in her handwriting both before and after. It's brutal trying to read her left hand writing, but she managed. She just kept going. Let me see. Her compositions. Her output consists of solo instrumental works, the oboe and viola. I thought that was interesting that those were the ones mostly. Works for piano, chamber ensemble works for chamber and full orchestra, 12 symphonies, band, choral pieces, and cantatas, songs, vocal chamber, and operas, including the Cask of Amontillado, I missed a syllable, from 1954. Most of the works that are known to be written in the 1950s and 60s. So that's a lot of works by somebody we don't remember. And the fact that her publishing was so visible, her performances were quite visible. In many of her works, you hear the influence of 12-tone techniques and counterpoint from her work with Dalla Piccolo. Miniatures, a short piece for orchestra, Frammenti, you will hear her melding of European influences, spirituals, and African-American elements, such as Soul Symphony No. 10, or Graves of the Untold Americans and Bicentennial Reflections, a cautionary tale about U.S. race relations and their potential for violence. So she was very much reflecting who she was as a person in her writing. In Europe, she conducted orchestras mainly in performances of her own works and toured as a lecturer on American music in the 1950s. She also sang many of her works. I just can't imagine someone that's singing 1 minute, conducting 1 minute, composing the next minute, and just moving fluidly between them. In the U.S., numerous performances by American orchestras of her study for orchestra, originally called A Short Piece for Orchestra, performed by the New York Philharmonic in 1965, in Town Hall, Stabat Mater in 1958, and a recording of Stabat Mater, Short Piece, and Homunculus in 1960, 1962, and 1969. She had all these recordings. At the end of Edwards' article, she states, "Perry's music has not yet achieved the attention it deserves. More editions, studies, performances, and recordings are needed so that a fuller and more accurate assessment of her output can be developed." You see the difference in this photograph of Perry. Look at it for a second, and then, so you can see the change in her just in those years. Recovering the musical legacy of Julia Perry. My curiosity about Julia Perry that began in my doctoral program expanded when I discovered the two spirituals, I'm a Poor Little Orphan from 1952, and Free at Last, 1951, published in 1995 in Art Songs and Spirituals by African American women composers, edited by Vivian Taylor, founder of Videmus. This is the nonprofit that I have been running since 1997. These were the only works by Perry I had ever seen, and they represented spirituals that I had not seen arranged by other composers. They're still unique. That I think I've seen one other setting of Free at Last, and none of I'm a Poor Little Orphan. Videmus produced a commercial recording, which you heard, of I'm a Poor Little Orphan and I'm a Poor Little Orphan and Free at Last. I'm a Poor Little Orphan was sung by Ruth Hamilton, a student of Roland Hayes. I'm going to let you hear that in a minute. That uses a minor key speaking to the pain of loss, perhaps representing the loss of her sister. At the end, though, however, of the piece, She ends with a Picardy third, symbolizing optimism for a reunion in another life. Free at Last was a song of freedom heard in the contraband camps. These were the camps created in the United States when enslaved people tried to push toward the north, and the Union Army did not have a place for them. So they created camps to hold them. So these were freed people trying to get their freedom. The Union Army did not want to send them back south because they knew they would be punished or killed. They also didn't want them to continue moving north because the north was not prepared for them. So they actually put them in camps, and that's a story that is not quite often told. But while in those camps, Free at Last is that song that was created and heard throughout the camps. I looked for more of her songs. Oh, this is the song of joy over being set free that was heard. I looked for more of her songs, but found only these two in print, and I performed these two for many years. I'd like you to hear the recording, since you heard the first one, Free at Last. I'd like you to hear Ruth Hamilton singing I'm a Poor Little Orphan. Oh, and that's the recording that it's on. She's a contralto. Very haunting melody. Listen, very ends on the Picardy third. Here's your hopeful chord, major chord. Ruth Hamilton was about 80 when she recorded this, and she had spent her life singing spirituals, and as I said, she studied with Roland Hayes, and Roland Hayes was born in the 1800s, late 1800s, but he toured for part of his time with the Fisk Jubilee Singers, and he came to Europe, but he began to establish a career as a concert singer, not as an opera singer, because those opportunities did not exist for him. And so he specialized in German and sang it really beautifully. And he was the one, it was a singer that came to Germany to do a concert, and he was booed. As soon as he walked on the stage, the place erupted, but the German audience did not want to see this black man singing German. He just stood there. And I was always amazed reading that account that he just stood there because until they realized he wasn't going to leave. And then he started, "Du bist du," and he said the everything just, you could hear a pin drop while he sang that Schubert song. And at the end of it, they're cheering for him. And most of his work was in preserving spirituals. He actually did spiritual arrangements, and then he went into teaching. And she was one of his last students, but he was teaching the tradition of how to sing spirituals, but also how to just sing operatically, even though that was not possible for him. During the pandemic, as Michael mentioned, Professor Harper mentioned, several colleagues had conversations, and we expressed interest and curiosity about the compositions of Julia Perry. Where were the scores, and what were they like? Because this is all we had heard. I posited with our collective interest, we had an opportunity to work together to share information and perhaps solve some of the mysteries. I did not envision that we would be able to take on the issues of legal heirs and copyright holders, which had heretofore prevented clear access to her music. I convened this working group, a virtual working group of about 10 performers, scholars, conductors, to see if we could put our collective energy and wisdom together to use resolving the issues. One of the key stakeholders was the Akron Symphony Orchestra, where Perry lived most of her life. They had done extensive work to celebrate her music, as some of the music was written for that symphony. They had also begun trying to work legally to find a path forward for her music. Their conductor, Christopher Wilkins, joined our group, and we began collaborating to move the issue through the Ohio court. So we moved from being performers to being advocates in court, to the eventual creation of a Julia Perry estate. So one of the clear paths that we've gotten from is that it's no longer nebulous, but there is a clear estate. And we are, with their leadership, we are very close to establishing a copyright holder so the works can proceed to be researched, published, performed, recorded, and distributed. We hope to make a positive announcement in the next month. I am actually answering the lawyers while I'm here. I've been in between things, going back and looking at my emails and seeing, ooh, they need an answer for me on this one. Let me answer. So that's one of the most exciting things that we've all been working on is, can we clear this up so that her music can be heard and we can find more? We can't even go and research more of the music because any archives that has it won't let us necessarily get in to see it yet until we have that clearance of a copyright holder. An unintended consequence of our working together is a world premiere of one of her pieces. Notice the year I said, 2020 we started, and she died in 1979. So we did a world premiere. In one of our conversations, Christopher and I chatted about Akron, and I revealed that that is where I was born. As an aside, in hindsight, I realized also my birthday is one day after Julia Perry, which actually means I was alive. I was a child, but I was alive when she was a working composer, conductor in Akron, Ohio. You never know what's going to happen in life. The orchestra invited me to come to Akron to sing a piece entitled Frammenti dalla lettera di Santa Caterina for soprano, chorus, and orchestra, written in 1953. Our research revealed that although the work was at Peer Music Publisher, it apparently had never received a world premiere, which means our performance on November 12, 2022 was a world premiere 69 years after the piece was written. So I'd like to share with you that oh, that's not it. I want to share that piece with you. If you can hold 1 second, I actually have to come out of this screen. And hopefully I don't mess up everything by coming out of the screen and letting you hear. Oh, that's not it. This is it. Uh-oh.
Do you need some help?
No, I just, sorry.
Only schools and hospitals
You just
are
have to hear his commercial from
Many families don't
skip.
have
Thank you. Now I can skip it. That's the only thing.
This tiny device has changed the way I eat breakfast every day. What is that?
Always happens to me as well.
I hate that. I hate that. Okay, so here is the world premiere of Fremente. It's a live performance, so forgive any flaws you hear from all of us. But I want you to listen to her language, her musical language. Especially if you know her Stabat Mater, or you will hear that this week. This is the other choral piece that is with soloist and orchestra, or big piece like that. And she wrote the text. That's in Italian. I forgot to mention that. Quite different vocal writing than the spirituals you just heard, right? And you'll hear the harmonies, when the dissonance when the choir comes in just a second. You can hear a counterpoint. So that's the whole piece. So you've heard, as you can see, the Stop It Mod is also a shorter piece that, sorry, I can't get this thing to stop. Huh?
Do you see where the control,
The thing is over here now for some reason. We ran into this before and I can't get it to move back to the, oh wait. I have to do it this way. We just disconnected for a minute. Sorry about this.
Don't worry, you're not the only one. It happens all the time.
Yeah, because it goes over there when you're trying to, yeah.
Just take your time.
I got it. Back to the current slide and so we're almost at the end. All right. Is something up there yet?
No, not yet. Or you can put it in here. Just wait, it's just waiting.
It'll take just a second, I'm sure. I think it's coming now. So, what's next? That premiere and the concurrent work by others has led to a renewed effort to locate and typeset the many unpublished works. To date, our team has recovered about 35 works of 100 that are being re-engraved for performances in the near future. In addition, we're just waiting for the copyright, but we're ready. In addition to this wonderful festival here to honor Julie Perez's contributions as a composer, conductor, and citizen of Europe, there are celebrations planned in the United States this year. To date, 2 new articles have been written in the New York Times to draw a spotlight on the work of Julia Perry. And I don't know if you know, but if you make it to the New York Times, you must be important. So literally, the article on Florence Price that appeared in the New York Times was a launch for all the interest in Florence Price in the last 10 years. And so they've just done the same thing for Margaret Bond. So we are very hopeful. We got 2 that have already gone through. So we're hoping we're going to garner a lot of attention. And the articles are spotlighting the celebrations that are happening worldwide, including the one you're attending today. March 13 to 16, we have created a 4-day event in New York City that honors the centennial of Perry's birth, with performances of Perry's chamber works, piano and vocal works, including premieres of Quineric Quixotic songs written in 1976, sung by bass baritone Donnie Ray Albert, that is if we get permission by then, and a performance of 6 Contrasts from 1954, sung by baritone Will Liverman, several songs sung by Laquita Mitchell, so we pulled out all the stops and brought the big guns in, and an orchestrated version of I'm a Poor Little Orphan that's going to be sung by me. During the festival, we also celebrate the release of a recording of the violin concerto. It's the first one on the CD American Counterparts, Curtis Stewart violin with experiential orchestra, James Blatchley conductor. As scholarship is important, we have brought together scholars such as Samantha Egge that you saw at the beginning of this week, who have studied the work of Perry for a public symposium to discuss the life and legacy of Perry. On Perry's birthday, March 25th, the University of Michigan will mark the centennial with a celebration of her songs and premiere 2 songs from 1954, Alleluia and Parody, that have just been engraved. We will also premiere Serenity for Oboe, written in 1972. In September, Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri, will present a 2-day academic symposium of Perry led by another of our working group members, Tad Biggs. The work of this group is to inspire others to take a look at works of Perry and give this composer her rightful place in our canon of music. Other African diaspora composers. Although reviving the works of Julia Perry has been particularly difficult, I am sad to say that the process used is not an isolated case. The works of many African American composers remain dormant, and I would say African diaspora composers is even more accurate, remain dormant for several reasons. Those reasons include racism, the racism that has occurred in whatever country, lack of publishing opportunities because these people have traditionally been under acknowledged in publishing, lack of knowledge. If we're not teaching these people in the academy, how do we know about them? How do we research them? Lack of preservation. Their works are sometimes destroyed or thrown or given to families who don't know what to do with them. They're not archived. And then the distrust of families, and we can talk about all of these at some point. I'm the co-PI for a humanities collaboratory team called Singing Justice at the University of Michigan. We make the following assertion in our forthcoming book on University of Michigan Press, Black Song, A Manifesto for Music and Justice. The exclusion of repertoire is self-perpetuating. When Black music is not taught, information about and experience with this repertoire escapes future generations of performers and teachers. The music fails to be performed, researched, published, or recorded. This unwritten but well-known collection of repertoire accepted as valuable and excellent forms the basis of nearly all musical study within schools and departments of music at mainstream American universities and probably worldwide as well. This is the canon of classical music. Let's make a concerted effort to reinsert Julia Perry, who was worthy of study, into our canon. I'd like to end my presentation with a short piece located on the research tool. I found it to help people find this repertoire. It's called the African-diaspora Music Project.org, and this is the Minnesota Orchestra, one of our partners, performing the chamber work of Julia Perry. You're going to hear the larger version, I believe, on Friday night.
Is that the short piece for?
A short symphony, short piece for orchestra. Is that Friday?
For large.
They're going to do on Friday for the large orchestra version. But this is from November 3rd of 2023 as a. I'm sorry, I should have had it queued up. As a pre-birthday celebration, they decided to do that on November 3rd, 2023. They did the chamber version of it. So I'd like to let you hear our last sounds from Julia Perry, this wonderful recording, which is, where's the chamber one? Orchestra. And as you can see, a lot of her pieces are very short. They're 8 minutes, 7 minutes. This is one as well. Oh, didn't start it. Sorry you can't see it. It's a nice picture. On the stage, it's mainly strings that are in the short version with a few brass and woodwinds, but the larger one, I assume, is much more encompassing of all orchestra. I think there's one bass, double bass in this one that I can see. This is one of her most popular pieces. This you'll hear a lot. So that 2 or 3, and letting those, and then coming up to a, in this one, she came back to a burst of sound, whereas in Frammenti, she lets the piece die out to the end, to its conclusion. And so with that, I hope that you've enjoyed getting a taste. Oops, let's get past this slide. I hope you've enjoyed getting a taste of Julia Perry's music. As I said, there's not a lot of pieces recorded for us to look at. I know you'll hear Homunculus tomorrow, and you'll hear the short symphony, and you'll hear the Stabat Mater this week. And as I said, those are among the better known pieces, but we hope that in the next very short time, we'll begin to hear some more of her brilliance and her variety in her writing, because we just don't know much yet. We're still learning. There's not a biography written yet. I keep nudging. All the scholars I know, I'm nudging. And so we hope that we begin to fill in some gaps in terms of what else happened while she was in Europe. We don't have the programs. Where did she conduct and what was she doing? We know a lot about her in Kentucky when she was born there. We know a good amount in Ohio when she moved there because of the symphony's records, but the rest of her life we're missing large swaths of who she is, and that would be, I think it would be a fascinating story of the musical styles that she shows us in her short life of 55 years. So thank you so much for your attention, and if there are any questions, please ask. I'm looking forward to I'm a performer. I always want you to hear the music.
This is the beginning of
Yeah.
something that definitely sounds like it is, and I really hope it is.
I hope so too.
Yeah, questions?
Yes. Oh,
You can go, Michael.
No, I just wanted to point out something about her repertoire, that we have done the piano concerto in 2 uninterrupted movements at the BBC Philharmonic, and I think that was I don't think
probably
it's
the world premiere.
probably the
I
world
think
premiere,
so.
But we
Yeah.
just didn't say so because you can't say so unless you know so, can you?
Right. That's the hard part, getting some of the verifications, because even for Frammenti, we sat and looked at. We said, how could it be at the publisher since the 1950s and 1960s, and it's not been performed? But they had in their records, they had no record of anybody ever performing it. So I think we have more of those to come. Yes, you had a question in the top?
Great, thank you so much. It's absolutely fascinating. A lot of this repertoire is new to me, but I'm really enjoying learning it
Thank you.
this whole week, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
I just wondered, given the variety of styles that you've shown us and that within her craft, can you give us any sneak previews in terms of your insights of what isn't published? You know, are there pieces out there that aren't published yet that we haven't heard that are going to show us an even different side to what she could do? Are we missing some real gems that would show us some of her art that we haven't yet had access to?
I think, yes. I think even just looking at the songs. So we have typeset, Marshall, it's about 20 Julia Perry songs. And so far, as I said, we've only heard the 2 spirituals, which are, pretty diatonic. But the songs, she wrote the poetry for some of the songs. Some are more religious in nature. Some are even more dissonant, leaning toward the dissonant side. They're all across the map. That you hear some that are very, a little diatonic and sweet, and then they become crunchy. So, just in that body of work, which we haven't had a chance to look at, some have, Alleluia has all this fioritura, and it's like, who is this for? Where did this come from? So with those for sure, we're looking at some of the chamber works in New York, so I haven't even heard them yet. So once I get there, I'll have a chance to hear them for the first time myself and see what that's like. More symphonic work. There's a wonderful piece that is just for string, bass, and cello. And experiential orchestra, again, I happened to have been on their program as a soloist, and they played this piece, and I said, what is that? You can hear how much she loves the lower string instruments, even in both Frammenti and the short piece for orchestra, she's very heavy on the bottom. And she extrapolates everything from the top and just explores the bottom. And it is just the richest, most beautiful, very dissonant piece, but it works. Her craftsmanship is what I love, and the counterpoint you hear, that everything is intentional. So that's what I'm looking forward to. There's lots. And we've only seen 2. I have not heard miniatures. There are 2 piano pieces. I mean, besides the concerto. There are 2 solo piano pieces. We're doing both of them in New York, so I can't wait to hear what miniature. That's what New York is about, is all the unpublished stuff that we've found thus far. We've gotten special permission to go ahead and do them as a part of this festival, to be able to hopefully announce that it can be, published from then on. And
Soul
performed.
Symphony will be great as well.
The Soul
I think
Symphony,
it's really
exactly.
quite
Yeah.
Because of the way she builds things up, and you don't know what's going to happen because she gives you very little
Yeah.
at the beginning, doesn't she? And
Yeah.
something amazing happens there.
Well, even with the short symphony, you hear that she has this outburst at the beginning, very distinct. It comes in the middle, and then she has this section where toward the end, you think she's done. As she brings everything down, it's going to end like Fermenti, and she surprises you and just bursts out again to end it. It's just brilliant and beautiful writing, and I don't know why we don't know her. So thank you. Yes, please.
I'm looking at
Oh.
the 2 short children's pieces, the peanut butter spread.
Yes, yes.
Popcorn.
Okay.
My hunch is that they were written for her own pupils, probably quite late
Probably.
in her life when her health was failing and she was trying to find other ways to make ends meet while she wrote desperate letters to publishers and so on.
Right, because nobody would answer her.
Is that roughly what you would imagine?
That is what I imagined, that they were either being used, as I said, she taught at these 4 universities, which a couple of them were HBCUs. And so she might have been using them in teaching, the classes, the class piano for students that were, I imagine they could have been from that, or do you know the date of them?
The publication date is 72.
Oh, then that's definitely not. That's when she's in Ohio and she's earning money, for sure, that's what that is.
But they may have been written before that.
If-
There's that story, isn't there, from one of the critics who
Mhm.
went past her apartment in the 60s and saw a sign in the window saying piano lessons.
Right,
And
right.
I don't know, but my hunch would be because of
Yeah.
the way they're written, very elementary, every note is fingered,
Yes.
that they are quite late. And the
Right.
manuscripts I've seen online.
Have you seen, are they pretty
very
bad?
bad.
Then that's probably her using her left hand. But if they're really bad, because her right hand, the manuscripts when she's younger, they're pretty easy to read. But it's the later ones, you can kind of guess that that's from that period. And yes, she had to support herself while nothing was happening for her. Wow, that's wonderful that you're using them. I love that. I love that.
That's about the only pieces of her music that I can actually play.
Yeah, because the prelude is tough when you look at that when it's very dense. And you can tell the size of her hand. I have a span of a ninth. I think she's way over here somewhere. As I try to look at you, I have to break the chords in order to play the prelude. But you don't get the same effect as you get with the string orchestra playing it. You get to hear those beautiful chords sustained and coming at the same time. Thank you for that. Yes.
Yeah, I've got one and then there's another one from
Yeah, so
the
this is from
intro.
online.
Oh, you're doing both. Okay.
So I'm going to be selfish and ask mine first.
Sure.
It's probably an easier question to take on as well, I suppose. My eyes lit up when I saw the type of genres of rep that she had written, and I saw band.
Yes.
And I imagine that is like concert band in that sort of
I think so.
position. I wonder if you could tell us any more about this. We know who.
I don't know the piece, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so
That-
later in her life, she had eschewed the whole idea of teaching. She
Right,
wanted to be a
right.
composer, and she wanted to be a professional composer, which many women didn't have the opportunity to do, but she chose that, which might have been a bad decision for her life, in the sense that she suffered, I think,
Yeah.
from that in her later life. But as she was getting older and living at home, and she had to try to make a living, so she was constantly sending these band arrangements
Well, I do know
to,
this, yes.
to universities, HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, to try to get something played, to try to get something published, because her her real classical work was not being taken up by the publishers.
Well, arrangements of her own music.
Well, she was writing these. Yes, sometimes. So Helen Walker Hill says there are a lot of things that Julia Perry wrote, and she lists them all. But sometimes there might have been something else that she named another name before.
She did that a lot.
So she did that quite a lot. So what is extant? We don't know if that's all there is, or if there's more stuff that was lost because sometimes she was renaming pieces.
Right.
And on that note, are the sources they're in more or less one spot?
Well, the book by Helen Walker Hill is a great source, but there's also the International Dictionary has a wonderful works list, and that I just can't remember as I've read through. It's about 3 pages of works by her, and they list them one at a time. They don't tell you where they are, but the article is the person I quoted, J. Michelle Edwards, and it's funny that she wrote me on Sunday before I came here. She just happened to be asking about, she saw online about the festival and wanted to know more detail. I said, well, it's in England. And you're a little late if you're writing me today, but she was thrilled to know that you know, the work of Perry is being is being considered, because she wrote this for the Center for Black Music Research back in probably 2000, and nobody was talking about Julia Perry. So she did the work and has a nice list at the bottom. A bibliography of Helen Walker Hill's book is in there, I know. And I can't remember who else she had in there. I think Mildred Denby Green is probably another person that interviewed and talked to Perry while she was living. She did a beautiful analysis of some of her work. So those are the primary sources for most of them, I think.
Yeah, and if you're asking specifically about the archives, there were 3 major archives, I would say. There's one at Fisk University, but it isn't a major archive. So there are 3. One is at the University of Colorado at Boulder, and that's a major. That's Helen Walker Hill deposited the works, and also they reconstructed and engraved. She did this engraved scores with another person, and they left those was like the Soul Symphony. And she also cleverly deposited them at another archive, so that if one wasn't working, then the other one would be. So she deposited them at Columbia College, which used to be the Center for Black Music Research, which doesn't exist anymore. We were talking about that today. And the other archive, where there's less musical stuff, but more things about her life and receipts for education at the Westminster Choir College and programs from New York and stuff like that. Those are deposited at Westminster Choir College, which is now part of Rider University.
The Akron Symphony also has some of her things, and then the publisher, Peer Music, actually has a lot of scores that have not been heard or that went out of print, and they've just kept them. They aren't doing anything with them. So there's actually, that's all the places we're going to check. As soon as we can get copyright clear, we actually need to go back to all of these places and start to excavate this.
And Carl Fisher as well.
Yes, Carl Fisher's the other publisher. Yeah, she was published by major publishers, so it should not have gone out of existence, but they sort of battle. It's definitely a battle. And you said you had a question from online as well?
Yeah.
It's harder?
Her director of research, in fact.
Okay.
May I ask a question about her orchestral music, please? On Monday, Michael mentioned the difficulties that arise from the German symphonic heritage, particularly the fact that this has historically been considered the yardstick of quality. How and why would Julia Perry choose, therefore, to write symphonies? Did she feel that this proved her prowess as a composer, or did she do something to reinvent the genre of symphony in a new image? I'm particularly interested in this in light of your point earlier that Julia Perry never lost sight of her African-American community/heritage.
That's a really great question, and it's coming from, there was an African-American symphonic tradition. Well, let me back up a little bit first. African-American composers, once they started writing, always wanted to write opera and symphony because those were the big genres that they were excluded from. They could do piano and voice things, they could do chamber music because they could get their friends to do those at home or in churches. But they always had as a vision, and so the music industry, our educational system even pointed toward opera and symphony. You've made it if you can write composers, you've made it if you write a symphony or an opera. And so in 1932, Florence Price, and then William Grant Still in 1930, Florence Price in 1932, and William Dawson, they finally, the three of them, burst into the symphonic tradition. And with their arrival in the symphonic tradition that early, and Perry's coming behind them, then the door is open. And that's what that push is about, is that people recognize, and what they did that was so unique, they all included African elements, African American elements. Like Still has a banjo in his piece, and his title is Hope from Africa, Hope in Africa, or something like that. And so it's very clearly talking about them as a black person in their writing. And the Dawson is called the Negro Folk Symphony. So it's very clear the message that they're signaling, that African Americans can belong here, and all three of them are including things like spiritual tunes in the writing. They're making that the basis of the melodic lines they have. They're using jazz. They're using all sorts of elements to show the history of African American music. So then your question in terms of Julia Perry, yes, she wants to follow a tradition that for William Grant Still was very successful. He's the first that is having works played by major symphonies in the United States. And so she sees also Florence Price succeeding and getting a performance by the Chicago Symphony, but she also sees that next generation of composers was determined to push, to just keep pushing forward. The door's open, we're coming. And Julia Perry just had such a beautiful affinity and was the right person with her background of being both a conductor and a composer and knowing voices and knowing instruments. I mean, I think her orchestration is absolutely masterful. And does that sort of answer the question? Oh, you don't know because you didn't ask it. But I think that's, I mean, Michael, you're welcome to add anything.
Well, I
but
was going to say that I was just looking up Fela Shawande, who was the
Fela
father
Shawande.
of Nigerian art music. And in 1955, I was looking at when did his African Suite come, and it was in 1955. So it's all in this time. You must remember that it's just after the war.
Right.
Just after the war. And African Americans are coming back, not like after the first war and just going back and saying, they're going, okay, now we fought this war, we expect something of it. And so there were new opportunities, and there was soon the push for equal education in the US. So there was all that, and all of that stuff always existed. The desire to succeed always existed in the African American community, and I imagine in all African heritage communities, they have within their own communities, that desire to succeed. So she had all of these things around her that said, you can succeed. She came from that sort of background. She came from an upper middle class African American background. So her grandfather had been really instrumental in the training horses in the Kentucky Derby. So he was really important. He was the first one acknowledged, first African American acknowledged for that. Her father was the first African American doctor in Lexington, for the city in Lexington, Kentucky. Her family was successful, and so everything about her said, you can do whatever you want to do. So there would have been no question in her mind that she could go to Italy,
that she could
go
push
and do whatever she wanted to. And there were opportunities through the U.S. Information Service after the war, probably the CIA, but we can't say that too loudly. But they were trying to spread the American life into Europe, and she was part of that. And there were others. So she had all sorts of examples around her saying,
success was,
just do this.
That black people could succeed. She came up in that era that she's getting the pushback from the civil rights era that black people can't succeed, but she's a part of the intelligentsia that is, saying that black people can succeed. Yep.
And just to confirm, it does. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. She writes, quote, the door is open, we are coming, end quote. And include that quote. It's a powerful
The door is open, and that's what it's always about, that somebody has to be the first, somebody has to open that door, and you all are actually opening a door right now with what you're doing with Julia Perry, because it's not happening in that many places, but I hope that the push as we advertise all of these places, that she doesn't stop, that we keep going further. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, it does follow on.
Sure.
That's a little bit, actually. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
Talk, marvellous. And just thinking about this question about orchestras and those stats you put up at the beginning that were quite alarming. And as you say, the numbers pretty low.
They're very low.
Geographical span of the source data.
Yeah, when you think of the concert the length of a concert season for one orchestra might be 20 concerts or more. I don't know. I don't even know what they're.
Yeah, but I wonder if this has to be so much on orchestras actually, because thinking about what's happening now and the success of Pamela Z, such an interesting artist in
I love Pamela
West
Z.
Coast, Carino Sumar in New York doing amazing things. But these guys aren't writing symphonies.
No.
And they're not writing for orchestras.
No.
And in fact, very few composers are actually. And I wonder if there's a shift in focus there.
There is. We've kind of swung back around, and this next generation of composers aren't being held back by thinking, I deal with opera singers, and a lot of what they're saying and doing is, I can be an activist and sing Tosca. There was never that kind of an attitude in the past. You would always get opera singers that say, okay, I need to sing Tosca and I need to hide the fact that I'm proud of my heritage. But so that they're commissioning young composers to write song cycles, because I'm working with a couple of the young people and they're like, oh yeah, I just asked Jasmine Barnes. I was like, who? When they first, some of the names, I don't even know the people. They're like, I went to school with this person. I'm asking them to write a song cycle for me. That was never the thinking. The thinking was, I have to get Western European repertoire and my operatic career and go this way. They're like, I can do this. We see you. You're going all over here. We can do this too. And I love that. And so it is changing the paradigm for composers, because actually in the United States, a lot of the young composers are now getting composer in residencies with major organizations. Carlos Simon was a doctoral student at Michigan when I came 7 years ago. He's the Kennedy Center's composer in residence for 2 years. And I said, you got the youngest person possible. I love Carlos. But that's what I'm saying, is that some of them are going that path because they're getting the major commissions. And then others are, okay, well, if you don't want me to write a symphony, I'll write X. I'll write this opera. They're going in whatever area they can get the opportunities, and very proud of it. And they don't feel that need to. They don't feel the need to prove themselves in the same way that the generation before that we just talked about felt we have to get to opera and symphony. They're like, we get to what I've got Grammys doing recordings. Why do I need the opera company? Is sort of the attitude I now hear from them, that they feel they can be successful in other ways, and y'all will call them when you're ready, because they feel like they're in the place, and you'll call.
And the thing is, I think we the word conservatoire says it all. Mm-hmm. And I think we're a little bit stuck, and we're probably moving a little bit further ahead than the other ones. But conservatoires conserve, and so we want to keep things as they were and sort of an aspect. And I think unless we start to change, because I was just talking with Sam Austin from the SU, from the Student Union, about this, unless we change the way we think about auditioning people, we're going to be left behind, because we're auditioning with the same stuff that we had from the 19th century, which is all about a construct that was put in place to keep the lower people down and the higher people up. And we need to change that construct so that those young people feel like they can come in and play what they like, what they love, and we open the door for them to love more that we offer them. So I think if we can do that, and I said to Sam, you need to challenge the establishment on this as a student union. You need to challenge them, because you know what you like, you know what you want to produce, and if you're producing something that you love, then we're going to get better music. So
I'm glad you said that, because universities in the United States are also making some steps, that they are doing things such as having audition repertoire that includes African-American repertoire, because they now see orchestras are playing it, so they're actually training their students. There are books that are now being written in terms of audition excerpts for things like William Grant Still's Symphony. That never was a thought in the past, but it has been happening within the last 5 years. They're doing things like audition requirements are changing. At my school, for singers, they have to sing something by either a woman, an African-American, or African-diaspora composer, one song, coming in the door. That's written clearly because it tells them what our values are. You still have to sing your arias, you still have to sing your art song, but it also says our value is also that we are trying to expand to include the world and include underrepresented people, whether it's women or other ethnic minorities. So we have made some moves in some places, but he's right. I mean, some of the bigger conservatories aren't going to change. They haven't and they aren't, but a lot of places for us actually are, because they see what has happened in terms of programming and they want their students to be prepared.
The other thing, Adam, in your class the other day, someone said, you know, Samantha Ege was asking, so what do you hear about? And one of the young people said, oh, I hear Gershwin. But no, that's okay. It's, you know, it's wonderful because that's what they hear, because that's what they were taught.
William Grant Still.
But William Grant Still came before Gershwin, and Gershwin used to attend all of his band
rehearsals
and performances. And you know, Gershwin, as Louise said, was sitting in the audience when Florence Price made her premiere play. Was she playing with the symphony orchestra?
She was playing I forgot the piece. I've forgotten the piece.
So Gershwin will have had that influence from her, and from William Grant Still. And you can listen to Gershwin's is it Rhapsody Blues, and you can listen to the lick in his piece, and you can hear William Grant Still Symphony, and you hear where it comes from. So I said, why didn't you hear Florence Price and William Grant Still in Gershwin?
Right.
So it's the other way around, and I think it's retraining our minds to actually see where these influences come from. And it's not, music is fluid. We all take stuff from other people. I mean, some of Handel's whole oeuvre is from another, German composer. So it's not that we don't exchange music, but we need to acknowledge where it comes from.
That's
and
the
be
problem.
honest about that.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's amazing answers.
Thank you.
Really fantastic. Just to sort of, I come back as the establishment. Who would have ever thought I'd be towards the establishment?
You're a good one, Adam.
We all become the establishment.
We could do fabulous things like classes. Samantha's wonderful class yesterday, and we can do our best with our messaging. But we don't have any prescribed audition repertoire. We say you can play whatever you want. And
Good.
350 people apply, and 60 of them play Chopin Ballade No. 1. Anybody plays anything different is given serious consideration.
Yeah.
I mean,
But they change when they see the culture change. That if they begin to see that when they get here, you all are doing things other than Chopin, and I love Chopin too, but if they begin to see, they program a Florence Price piano concerto, then that word does seep back to those who will come to audition next. And especially if you all sort of give that message out there of, we're looking for people who think something different, who come with a different idea. It comes in branding. That's what Michigan has done. The branding from 1977, when they published an anthology of African-American art song. We've been keeping that legacy alive, which is why they hired me 7 years ago to keep a legacy of African-American music in the forefront of people's consciousness. So people know when they're coming, they're like, oh, Louise Toppin's on the faculty. Well, because I talk not only about African Americans, but women and other ethnic minorities. That's important. And so they come with some really fascinating stuff nowadays. Yes, sorry.
I think last question.
Okay.
That's okay.
Thank you.
We're going to continue this at the bar. Go, Dave.
Oh, we get to go to the bar. No, I'm just kidding.
Again, thanks so much for such a fascinating presentation. And I'm just loving the music. I also love the fact that it's actually really modernist.
Yes.
And it represents such diversity of American music in
Yes.
the 20th century and beyond. I mean, it was just a thought based on what Adam was saying this morning, that when we turn things over to the students, it's amazing what happens. So
Yes.
In the postgraduate lecture session this morning, I had one singer singing Joseph Benoit and also Florence Price. My pleasure to accompany these beautiful songs.
Yeah.
And then I had to look up the name, and there's an amazing female Czech composer, Kapitalova.
Oh, yeah.
She died at the age of 25.
Yeah.
She wrote 100 art songs
Yes.
And I'm just reminded that when we go with the students and what their interests are, they really want to do all this.
Exactly. They really are pushing the agenda now. And all we, I'm establishment too. I've been teaching for 34 years, so nobody's going to say I'm young in the profession, especially not the students. Oh, you've been here a long time. You got old, Dr. Toppin. But the thing is that I listen to them. I listen to them talk about their interests. It's not that we, as Michael and I were having Professor Arford and I were having a conversation, it's not that we're trying to change the canon to not include Mozart and Beethoven, who I still love. I will always love them. But we're trying to include and expand the canon to have space for other people. So when I teach about Mozart, I might give an example by Joseph Boulogne so that they can do a homework assignment. Or if I need them to talk about a string quartet, he's a perfect example, the French string quartet that he standardized. And so it's how we as professors begin to make that shift and say, let me just start. I don't know maybe a lot of these pieces, but let me start by listening to what they're coming with and looking to see, does this fit? If I need to talk about postmodernism, can I put Julia Perry? This stuff is here. So that's my final message is I think we just, it's for us to think too and kind of take it in our bodies and say, okay, we can make a change along with our students, not push against them to not make their change. Because we're trying to push them in a box that was our box. I was trained like you all. Okay? Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed being here with you today. To the bar. It's weird for a singer to get applause and I didn't sing. I'm still not used to this.